Well, hi, sweet friends, and welcome to the Harbour Breeze Home Podcast. I'm your host, Rita Joy, and today I'm beyond excited to have my very first guest interview. He is someone I know quite well. In fact, I've been married to him for 33 years. So today I want to introduce you to my husband, Erwin. Not only is he my husband of almost 33 years and dad to our three boys, his first career was 24 years in a year-round Christian camping ministry where he had experience in all kinds of roles from property manager and maintenance to 9 years as the executive director. Now he works full-time at our local church as the director of facilities and seniors ministries. He's also a volunteer chaplain at our local hospice, and he's 3/4 of the way finished getting his master's degree in chaplaincy and spiritual care. If you don't find him at work, studying, or flipping burgers on our patio, you'll probably find him out riding his mountain bike on the trails and trying to avoid the black bears. So I thought this first interview would be fun to answer some of the questions that my Instagram followers have asked of us. I've introduced him over there, and he even has his own channel called Mr. Harbour Breeze. He's one of my, I would say he is my very best business fan. So we're going to start our little interview here now by first, we are going to talk about something I've never told my Instagram followers about my husband. And it's something that's part of our story. So my husband has a speech impediment that a lot of you would know of as stuttering. So if you've listened to the King's Speech, that is the type of speech impediment it is. So here we go. We're going to start talking as if you're not around. We're just going to have a little chat. So the first question most people ask is stuttering caused because you are nervous?
Well, I bet you can't wait to hear me now. No, it's not actually. Stuttering is something that just happens. When you're nervous, of course, it gets worse. But I can talk in front of people, lots of people sometimes, and then I talk with one person and I stutter worse. So it comes and goes, and it's better or worse depending on whatever, all sorts of things.
So I always find it really amazing. Like, do you get nervous if you have to make a phone call?
Not anymore. No.
Yeah.
I used to.
Yeah. So when I met Erwin, like the number one question was, how did we meet? And all the questions asked on Instagram were mostly about how we met and our story. So we will talk about that today. But when I met you, your stutter was more pronounced then, correct?
It was quite a bit worse. I love to sing because that was one place I didn't have to stutter, but my stuttering was, pretty bad.
So I met him, and I had never met anyone who had stuttered before. And I think one of the neatest things is, and one of the things that I learned the most from him, even from the start, was that I was a terrible interrupter, wasn't I?
Yeah.
I can talk a mile a minute, and I was a terrible interrupter. But the worst thing you could do for a stutterer
is to interrupt them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to also
give them words, finish their sentences. Drives me nuts.
So he taught me to take a breath and listen. And really, deeper than that, he taught me that communication is far more than lots and lots of words. So I find it kind of neat and really quite beautiful, really, that I learned so much about true communication from a person who stutters.
Kind of ironic, isn't it?
And the other thing that was really neat, in our early years of marriage, I think we had our first two boys. Mm-hmm. We had the opportunity to go to a stuttering clinic.
Yeah.
And we both learned so much about stuttering then.
It was amazing. And one thing I learned that they actually used one of my fellow students said it this way. He says, come hell or high water, I've got to talk slow. And that really helped, actually. When I get talking too fast, the stutter gets way worse. It's not a cure-all, but talking slower does make a difference.
And when you were in school, they didn't have like very much speech therapy or anything like that, right?
Well, they sent me to a speech therapist once in grade 4 or 5, 6 maybe, and she was concerned about the way I said my S's. And even as a kid, I thought, I'm stuttering here, man. I work on that, not the S's, for Pete's sakes.
So it was interesting. This stuttering clinic it worked with a small group of people, maybe a dozen or so.
It was 4 of us, actually.
Oh, there was only 4?
Yeah, it was very small.
Very small. And some of the days I went as well. So what that speech therapy did was it taught them to count the cadence of their words and really, really, really slow down, like extremely slow down.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, like, the example that Erwin just gave of his fellow student he was an orthopedic surgeon. And he said, every year I have to come to the stuttering clinic because if I stutter with a patient, they will think that I'm dumb and I don't know what I'm doing. And I will never forget, like, him sitting there, and it was something else. And at that point, you guys had slowed your cadence down, like, abnormally slow.
Excessively.
Excessively slow. And yeah. I remember him saying, I know, come hell or high. And then he said that. Come hell or high water, I have to talk slow. And I learned so much about that. We learned that stuttering can be hereditary. Mm-hmm. So we watched out really carefully. All 3 of our boys at some point
went through a period. They did.
Yeah, they all stuttered for a very short time. And we have a super funny story about that.
Go ahead. You can tell better than
our middle son was in 2nd grade, and for whatever reason, that was when he started to stutter. And so we put in the requisition for speech therapy and all that. The teachers were always on the lookout for that because it can tend to be really hereditary. But by the time the speech therapist got around to visiting him, like months later, his bout with stuttering was over. He was talking just fine again. But she said to him, do you have some trouble talking sometimes? And he looks up at her and he goes, no, just when I have snot stuck in my throat. The teacher told us later, she said, I'm taught that I never laugh at a student's response. But she said, that one caught me so off guard. I laugh about it every time I think about it. So anyway, we just wanted to kind of explain that to you from the get-go before we tell our story, because that is part of our story. And we want you to know that if he does stutter while we do this interview, he's not nervous.
Exactly. And I'm not nervous about it. And so I don't want you to feel bad either. So I'm just fine. And don't worry about me. And if I stumble on a word, whatever, I'll try to edit some of it out, but I probably won't. And so, no, I'm okay if you're okay, and we'll be okay.
Yeah, there we go. And just side note, he is my podcast. I call him my podcast producer because I talk into this mic and do all that, but he adds the music and edits and all that. I couldn't do this podcast without him. So I'm so grateful for that. We're a pretty good team, I think.
We are.
So the number one question was, oh man, I should have written these down. But they wanted to know how we met.
Everybody wants to know how we met.
So here's where we met. We both chose to go to a Bible college in Alberta. And at the time we went, it was pretty happening school. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of students there when we went. Now there is
less. Let's just say less.
Way less. but at the time we were there, it was a happening place. And I'm from a very, very, very small town.
I'm from a fairly small town as well.
So when I got to campus, the first few days, I had to carry around a map because I would get lost getting to my classes. It was the population of the college at that time was bigger than the whole county that I lived in. So do you remember the very first time you laid eyes on me, darling? Do you even remember?
It was in a crowded room and I looked across and no, I don't. I don't remember at all.
I do remember the very first time I
Really?
met you.
Okay, let's hear it.
So the very first time I met you, I was with a friend who knew your family,
Right.
and you were in the college bookstore, and she introduced me. So the connection I made, I actually knew your brother who was going to the same college
Mhm.
at that time. So that was the connection. I met you sort of there, and then at a party at someone's home, like maybe a few weeks later.
Mhm.
But I didn't really know you much that whole first year.
Not so much. And my memories of that first part of the year was we were in a choir together, and I was in the back with the basses, and Rita was up front with the sopranos, and she was just one of those short girls up front who all I saw was the back of her head. So it wasn't that exciting that first little bit.
That's right. And that choir, it was funny as freshmen when you went to apply for your classes. Every freshman had to be in some kind of a choir.
Mhm.
And so the touring choir that you had to audition to get into just happened to be directed by a man who went to college with one of my siblings. And so I sort of knew of him and decided if I'm going to have to audition anyway, I might as well audition for the touring choir. But I knew that they were really good musicians, and I didn't think I would get in. And so then I was so shocked when I got into this touring choir, and I was so nervous because I was standing beside this girl. Her name was Melody, and her voice was exactly like her name.
She was melodious. Yeah.
She had the most incredible voice. And I kept thinking, I don't think I belong here. And I was so nervous. In that. And I heard this strong male voice behind me. But when I say I never turned around to know who that was the truth.
She was a little shy.
I was so nervous. I truly did not know who was behind me. And then later on in the year, they had auditions for small music groups.
There were octets, weren't they?
Octets. Yeah. And lo and behold, I got into the same octet as you.
Yeehaw. That was it. Things went crazy from there.
I'd like to say that it was just like the next 4 years we met, then started dating, and then got married after we graduated. But no, our story took far more twists and turns than that.
We were on a bus traveling across Canada, out toward Ontario, I believe it was, and our bus driver was crazy, but that's another story. And we had to drive throughout the night, and so we're all trying to sleep in there in different positions, and at one point, you have these late night conversations, and Rita and I had become friends by then, and so I was telling her all about how I liked this other girl, and how she didn't seem to be noticing me, and she was the most understanding listener. It was it was amazing.
And I think that was the funnest part. We truly did start out as
just really good friends.
Good friends.
Yeah.
He was interested in someone else. I was interested in someone else. And so we were just friends processing these love interests that didn't seem to be noticing us.
Didn't go anywhere. Wasn't going anywhere, I tell you.
Well, and also we need to point out that I think you need to understand that we were kind of fuddy-duddies with our peers. We both had like very unusual personal convictions.
Convictions. We were rather conservative. Let's just put it that way.
To the extreme.
It was a bit crazy, actually.
I don't regret it.
No,
I do not regret it.
It worked out for us.
But we had both independently, long before we met each other, had set certain goals and standards for dating. Yeah. And for me, dating wasn't a game. It was super serious. The only reason I would want to date someone would be to interview them for marriage. So I always say the dating years were horrible for me. I didn't like the dating years But you are also the only person I ever dated.
Right. And you're basically the only person I ever dated. I had a few forays, but it didn't work out very well. But we were so concerned about this being the right one, the perfect one. And I overthought that like crazy. It was amazing.
I think we both overthought it.
Yeah,
and, I really, that saying that, you look across the room and your eyes meet and you just know, like that little statement, you just know, that really tripped me up. Like I was waiting for the fireworks to go off and, some huge sign that I would just know. So I would say that over the 4 years that we dated off and on and off and on, that was, it was a really big decision to us. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to make sure that we were making the decision that God wanted us to make.
Yes.
And we took it very seriously. And I would say that by the time we decided to get engaged, we knew each other very well.
We did. It had been basically 4 years, and we'd been at the same college. I was actually a year ahead of Rita, and so I should have graduated a year early, but I took a few more programs, so we ended up graduating the same. But yeah, we agonized over that, and we broke up and broke each other's hearts once or twice. And by the time it happened, we knew each other well, and we knew we were in this for the long haul. People talk about the first year of marriage being hard, and we thought it was a breeze because we'd gone through all that crap already. Mm-hmm. So it was easy in retrospect.
Okay, I need to back up a little bit. Like, I need to explain that he graduated with 2 degrees. So he got 2 degrees in 5 years. So my freshman year was his second year, but the way he explained it made it sound like,
Yeah, well, whatever.
He's not slow in education. Hey friends, I'm going to interrupt our story for just a minute to tell you about something special we've put together for you. There's a saying that opposites attract when it comes to marriage, but we don't say that's necessarily true for us. We actually have a lot in common.
However, there is a big difference in the type of books we read before going to bed. On Rita's nightstand is a pile of easy-reading Christian fiction books. I sometimes tease her and refer to them as brain candy. They're the kind of books like Hallmark movies. They're the feel-good kind where the girl always gets the guy and they live happily ever after.
And over on Erwin's nightstand is usually an iPad full of Kindle books that are of the deep thinking and serious variety. He's the one you want to talk to about deep topics, and he loves every minute of it. He loves to read me quotes, which I enjoy, but I usually have to close my eyes and say, read that to me again so I can wrap my head around it. We've put together 2 Amazon shops, one with my favorite books with authors like Becky Wade, Julie Clausen, and Courtney Walsh.
And one with mine, which includes some amazing books I've discovered from authors such as N.T. Wright, Kristen Cobas-Dumais, Scott McKnight, and of course C.S. Lewis. I've also included a few fiction authors I enjoy occasionally.
I'll put the link to both of those shops in the show notes for you to check out later. You just might want to pick up something to read on your next vacation. So now we're going to head back to the last story. So we thought it would be kind of fun to end this little episode of how we met with our engagement story. So I need to give you a little background first. We explained that we both had pretty strict guidelines that we'd given ourselves with dating. One of which was Erwin had decided he would never tell a girl, "I love you," until the next sentence would be, "Will you marry me?" So while we were together and not together, dating, and, we were friends all those years. But in the fall of our last year at college, he had finally told me that he loved me. And I knew that that was the big thing. And he even said, I can't ask you the next question quite yet, but I knew then that he was serious. He was not going to break my heart again. And so I was like, okay,
Here we go.
Here we go. I can trust this guy not to break my heart again. So that was part one. The other thing, we had both decided we would never kiss a person until we knew we were going to marry them. That's what I say. When we were fuddy-duddies with our peers were like, that's just weird. But that's just the way we were. And I don't regret that either. So if you're young and dating, feel free to adopt our strange strategies. It saves you a little bit of pain. Anyway, the college that we were at had been notoriously super, super, super strict. Like the first year I was there, girls sat on one side of the classroom, boys sat on the other. Like that's how strict it was. It was very, very strict. But in the years that we were there, it got less and less strict. There had been a rule that you could not get engaged while you were students at this Bible school. But that rule changed the very last year we were there.
That's right.
But there was some caveats around the rule.
It took them a while to actually let go of it.
Yes. So one of the caveats, I don't even know if I knew this part, but if you wanted to get engaged while you were students, you had to write a letter to, who was it?
The vice president.
Oh, the vice president. You had to write a letter to the vice president.
The guy had to. The guy had to write the letter.
Okay.
That's just crazy.
Okay, so the guy had to write the letter to the vice president, and then it was decided by a group, like a committee or a staff or something, whether a couple could get engaged or not.
That was allowed or not, yeah.
Right. So now, with that background, okay, you carry on with the story.
So at Christmas of that year, I went shopping, and I got the most beautiful ring, she tells me.
I do love it very much.
And I spent all the money I had, I think, but I think I maybe even borrowed a bit from my dad that I had to pay back later. But got the ring, and I hung on to it in my dorm room that whole winter, because they had told me when I sent the letter in, which I sent in earlier sometime, I can't remember, but they told me that I had to wait until the reading break, the spring break. For whatever reason, it couldn't happen during just any old weekend. It had to be during the spring break. So I was hanging on to it. I go in my dorm room, I'd open it up, I'd look at it, and stare at it and wonder and all that stuff. And so I planned a trip to Banff. For some reason, I got this in my head. I was going to propose on the gondola in Banff, going up Sulphur Mountain.
But before spring break happened, probably a month or so before spring break happened, both Erwin and I were going to this little Bible study group at the vice president's house on the campus there. And it was super fun. And we had lots of friends that went. And one night we were going to go there for like a party. It was a social dinner gathering, just the whole Bible study group. And we were going to have dinner together. And I knocked on the door. And one of my friends opened the door, and she had this strange look on her face, and she says, "Are you engaged?" And I said, "No. Why would you ask that question?" And she goes, "Could you wait out here a minute?" And she shut the door in my face and wouldn't let me in. And I thought, that is the strangest thing ever. Like, why in the world did that happen? And then, we had a wonderful dinner, and it was time for dessert. And when dessert came out, it was the strangest thing. I could tell it was cake that had writing on it, but it was all cut up, so you couldn't see what the writing was. And I got super suspicious, between the question and the cake. So then I started asking Erwin all kinds of questions. And he had to tell me later that he had to confess to a lot of lying that night.
I lied a lot, like no Bible college student should. I lied and I lied.
Anyway, so...
Turns out, I'd actually written the letter, I just remember now, to the dean of students. But the dean of students passed the letter around to all the vice presidents, and this vice president was one of them. So that was the...
Oh, yeah. So he was part of the meeting. So he just assumed because it was okayed that we were engaged already. Anyway.
But I was waiting for spring break because I was a good boy.
Right.
And all that.
So spring break rolled around and he had this great trip planned to Banff.
And of course, I couldn't take just her because she'd suspect something. So I invited my good friend and a girl that he was interested in to come along. And they had a boring time in the back seat because she didn't really like him. And we were up front and we drove to Banff to the gondola. And so we get there and I'm like, okay, we're going to go up the gondola. And of course, they knew what was going on. And so I said, well, Rita, they want to go on their own. So we're going to go by ourselves. And she didn't buy that. She was like, well, why? Why can't we go all together?
And the other thing was, I kept thinking, I don't understand why in the world he wants to go on this gondola because I'm afraid of heights. I kept saying, I don't think I want to go on this gondola. And he kept telling me, yeah, you actually do. And
It'll be fun.
Why is he being so forceful that we have to go up this gondola? And then we get there and he tells me that our friends want to be on their own. And I'm like, well, that's just weird. Like, why did they suddenly want to be on their own?
Because they hadn't all day.
And so then just Erwin and I get in this gondola. And we sit down. And the first thing I say is, what is that hole on the floor for anyway?
And it was a ring-size hole. Honestly, it freaked me right out. I could just picture pulling out the ring, dropping it, and it going right down the mountain. I almost got cold feet right there.
Thankfully, he didn't.
Yeah, I didn't. I got my kiss after all.
So people like to ask me, did you stutter when you asked me to marry you?
I don't know.
You absolutely did not.
Good for me.
And yes, so he asked me before. I think you asked before the gondola even took off.
Oh, I was a little nervous by then. You talk about stuttering and nervousness. I was very nervous.
But he did not stutter. Yeah. And he brings out this beautiful ring. He asked me to marry him. I say yes, and I finally got my first kiss, and it was worth the wait.
It was pretty messy.
So that's our engagement story, and it has been just bliss.
Not a cloud in the sky since then.
And don't believe that. Do not believe that. But no,
we still love each other after almost 33 years. So it's been a good run.
I really wouldn't want it any other way. So we'll leave you with that story today. Thank you so much, friends, for joining us at the Harbour Breeze Home Podcast. And until next time, have a beautiful day and toodaloo.